and welcome to another episode of Mindset Over Matter. I'm your host, Gabby Gooding, and today I'm really excited to have Simone Lea join me to dive into the topic of business and spirituality. So welcome, Simone.
Hi, how are you going today?
Very, very good. How are you?
Oh, I'm very, very, very good. I'm just pumped to be here and super excited to share with your audience. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Typically, Simone, I would have introduced you a little bit more in terms of your background, maybe a bit of your story, but I just wouldn't have done it justice. And so, because you have such an interesting story, so to get us started, I would love it if you could share just in a nutshell, what your story is, because the whole premise of my podcast is to speak with people who have learned to think differently about different parts of life and then just life in general. And I think that the way that you have been living your life is such a perfect example of that. So if you don't mind, I would love to hear it.
Of course, no problem, Gabriella. Easy, easy. So it's kind of a two-part life, I suppose. There's the business part and the spirituality part. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown there. So I grew up on a farm, and I just wandered around and wandered barefoot, connecting with everything, talking to all of the animals, singing, writing music, that sort of stuff. Went to a private Christian school. Everyone assumed I would go to uni. That was kind of like my career path. Good little girl. And in year 11, I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and literally was like, I'm going to go to the school of life. So I started my first business straight out of high school. And then that was just teaching singing and piano from home. So that was nothing too exciting, just a little bit of a taste. And by the time I was 20, I'd opened up a physical dance studio with more than 7 different staff and teachers teaching my curriculum, a second room that had a lot of other types of classes as well, like yoga and Pilates, that sort of thing. I had someone running reception, looking after the phones, that sort of thing. And I really just went into this very entrepreneurial journey and ended up a few years later, I'd been there, done that, and I was like, I really want to be free. I want to be able to travel. And so I ended up selling that business and deciding that I wanted a business that wasn't location based. I wanted to be able to work from anywhere. So that's when I started looking into the online space. I started trading the stock market, learning about Forex, that sort of thing. Went into book publishing, published over 150 books online worldwide, did that sort of thing. Then a mentor of mine that I absolutely loved, he was in the online education space. He did a lot of online summits. And at the time, he was just someone who was putting out really cool content that I liked, and I just followed him because I wanted to support him. And so I'd been following him for about 3 years, and then he wrote on, do I know anyone who wants to learn video editing? And I was like, this is a guy that's doing the sort of stuff I want to do, and I've just been following him because he's cool, but I will totally learn from someone living the dream for sure. And so I literally sat down for half an hour, wrote this amazing email. I was like, I'll do the first 10 for free. And that one decision, even though I had the book publishing company and I'd been publishing books online, that's what really got me into content creation and understanding that. And so I actually worked on more than 20 summits with him. And because of the relationship we had and the fact that I just gave so much value to him in terms of every time I was learning something, I would just work for free. I would never charge him for my learning time. This is a complete digress. I'm sorry. But I was just I want to learn this, and I'm not going to penalize for that because this is what I want to learn. And so I spent a lot of time working with him, and he taught me the ins and outs of his own business, which really got me into content creation, understanding things, learning about working on YouTube channels, podcasts, social media, all of that sort of stuff. And along the way, started doing a lot of business consulting and that sort of thing. And then over that time, I kind of realized that there's so much information out there about how you can start a business and the processes you can use to be successful, that it's not the outside that's affecting whether people are successful or not. It's the inside. Because we've all got access to all of that amazing information and all of the coaches and all of the courses. And so while I'd been on this beautiful journey as an entrepreneur and in a business sense, my spirituality had also started to grow and grow and grow and grow as well, which I had denied for around the age of 18, right through till, a good 10 years. I just denied that and was like, I just know things about people because of the fact that I know body language and I've read books on, understanding human behavior. And I just denied all of the spiritual side. And I started to really connect much more deeply with that and start to really honor that and start to really notice the shifts that happen when you do combine that business and energetics and spirituality side to everything. And that was when I started to go, you know what, it's more important for me to be helping people with the inner work than it is for the outer work, because the outer work, you can get that. Like, you can get that from YouTube. If you just want to work hard, read a few books, you could probably nut it out. But it's the inner work where we're connecting with that spirituality, that something bigger than ourselves, that purpose, that passion, that intuition, that drive, that flow. That's something that I just find so powerful, and so much, it just can transform your whole life to just be able to combine the two. So that's my life in a nutshell. Sorry, that was a bit longer winded than expected.
No, that's fine. And thank you so much for sharing it. First of all, I wanted to say congrats on your success, because there were some leaps of faith, I think, along the way. And I know that can be a little bit scary, but you've obviously done very well for yourself. So congratulations. And just, I wanted to go back very quickly on something you said, which was about how you had offered to do the first 10 for free, and put in the work and not charge if you were learning about things. And I just wanted to highlight that, not because I think that the answer is that we need to work for free necessarily at the beginning, but it just speaks to a little bit of the inside work. I guess we can talk about separately, but just even your attitudes and your work ethic, which I do think is important to call out, because I would assume that the person on the other end, right, who's hearing your passion really is what's coming through, right? I'm so passionate about this. I'm committed to it, to the point that I don't mind if I don't get paid for the first little bit to learn and to start on this journey. And maybe you'll think otherwise just from your experiences with people, but I think that there's a little bit of that missing these days. When I look around at work, there's a little bit of the opposite, actually. Well, I refuse to do any extra one task unless I'm compensated fairly for it. And so I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Like, do you think that was something that actually did help you get ahead? I would assume it did, but what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely think it did. And there's probably some things I should caveat with that as well. But yeah, like, I sat down and it took me 30 minutes to write this letter to this guy who I had only ever known online. And the only reason I was following him was because I like supporting other entrepreneurs. Like, he didn't know me from a bar of soap. I just was supporting him because I thought what he did was cool. And so for me, it was like, I'm just really keen. Like, I want to be an online entrepreneur. And here's a guy who wants someone who does content creation. I have no idea. Like, I had an interview with him and he's like, okay, so you just do this, this, this. And I'm like, yep. No idea. But I knew within myself that I was prepared to put in the hard work and I was going to make it work. And so obviously I did the first 10 for free. But when I say that I wasn't getting paid for learning new things after that, I was very, I'm good with communication. So for example, when he was teaching me something, I would always say, okay, how long does this take you? And if it took him an hour and it took me 3 hours, then I would charge for the hour, because that's how long it would take him to do it. And the other 2 hours I would work for free. So it wasn't necessarily that I was completely working for free if those tasks were something within my scope of work for him. It was that I wasn't charging him for time that I just didn't know my skill set, if that makes sense. So when I first started working for him, he could edit a video in 40 minutes. Every single one of those first 10 videos took me more than 2 hours. And I did all of that for free. And I think about that now and I'm like, 10 videos for free. That sounds like heaps. It was 20 hours of work. That is nothing for me to have done 20 hours of work for this human and then spend the next 4 years learning pretty much all of the processes inside his business. And we still work now. I'm like literally about to record some stuff for him after I get off with you, because there's some stuff he's like, oh, what are you doing with this? And I'm like, I'm just gonna be like, oh, just shoot you a little video and this is what I'm doing with this. And he does the same thing. He's like, have you checked out this? And so even now we still work together. It's obviously changed and evolved a lot as we've kind of gone our own separate pathways in our own separate passions. But yeah, like, I was always coming from this place of wanting to support this human and holding to my own integrity level. And my own integrity level is, if there's a gap in my knowledge, I'm not going to charge you for that gap.
Yeah, no,
So
that's really great. I'm glad that you elaborated a little bit on that because I think that's perfectly fair, and that's the way that I would do it too. Because in my mind, I would think, okay, well, if it takes me 3 hours and it would take him one, well, I don't want the fact that it's going to take me three times longer. The time element is already kind of a hindrance, I guess. And then on top of that, like let's say he needed it right away, and on top of that, you'd have to pay three times the amount. So I'm going to do whatever's within my control, which I guess is just the pay part for now, to kind of get rid of that barrier as much as possible. So good for you, and just that element of wanting to invest extra time, extra effort, extra passion and commitment to the work right up front. I do think there's something to that that helps people be successful. So I just wanted to call it out. Now,
yeah.
I did want to ask an unconventional question, I guess, because I'm personally curious. Uh, so you are living what is for a lot of people the dream, right? You're traveling the world and you're working from wherever you are, and I think a lot of people would love to have the same type of life. So I wanted to ask though, have you noticed that there are any downsides to doing that? Um, just to keep it real with the
Yeah.
audience. Unless there isn't, that's okay too. Maybe it is 100% rosy, but I thought I would ask.
Yes, look, firstly, I designed my life this way. So obviously the last couple of years, life has changed for a lot of people, and a lot of people are finding they can work from home, and they're really starting to see whether or not they're self-motivated, whether or not they can like actually do 4 hours at home without walking to the fridge, that sort of stuff. But I specifically designed my life in a way, I made decisions after I sold that first dance studio that I wanted to be able to work from anywhere. So I am already very self-motivated. I can sit down at my computer and work for 11 hours if I need to, just because I love what I'm doing, you know, like, so it's really easy in that way for me because this is the life that I actually want to live. But it does come with its challenges, you know, like at the moment, I'm living in Montenegro, which is Europe in the middle of summer. So I might have to move house every 5 days or move location. Like I prefer to be somewhere for about a month, but just the way that I'm doing this part of my journey, I'm moving a little bit more often, which means you do have days where you're in transit and you have to lug all your stuff around. You know, I have a big suitcase and I have a little suitcase. I've got microphones, I've got computers, I've got podcasting stuff. You know, I have all this stuff with me. And so there are little pieces that do make it a little bit harder, like scheduling in clients and interviews and that sort of stuff if I'm traveling, or the internet connection might not be great, or in each different location, the background is not what I want it to be. Like when I'm at home, I have this beautiful background behind me, and here you've kind of got a white wall and part of a picture. So there are little things to consider, and even little things like your diet changes, your sleep changes, your mattresses change. Yes. Sometimes you're like, whoa, this is a great mattress. Sometimes you're not. So there are little things that are going to come up. And if you are living this life, I would recommend figuring out what works for you, because for some people, they might like moving every 5 days. I personally prefer, because of the fact that I want to work and explore and live my life, I prefer to stay somewhere for a bit longer. Like I prefer to be at least 2 weeks in a location, because that gives me long enough to get into the groove, see everything, and do some work. So yeah, there are some little things, but my recommendation is find your way. Like find the way that works for you when you're living this life, and find what lights you up, you know, because for me, I knew that I wanted to live anywhere, you know, and now I'm doing it, and I'm balancing that. Like half of the reason I'm in Europe is because I'm a dancer. I do a lot of salsa dancing and Latin dancing, and this is the place to be for that. There are some phenomenal dance studios here. So I'm also balancing travel with work with dance training, you know, and then there's also like, you know, I want to eat all the food, and, you know, so it's finding what works for you and designing your life around that, because I could easily be sitting at home working 10 hours a day for somebody else doing that sort of thing, and you know, but I made conscious decisions that that's not the way I wanted my life to go. So design it the way you want it to be, and then consciously just take those steps. Like I knew before I started working with that mentor that I wanted to be online full time, you know, and so as soon as that opportunity came up, I jumped on it. I didn't second guess it. I literally sat down and wrote the email straight away. And that's kind of how it's worked. Anything that's in alignment with that life I wanted to create for myself, anytime an opportunity came up that was in alignment with that, I took it.
Yeah, and I think it takes a little bit of, well, not a little bit of, I would say a good amount of self-awareness ahead of time to even, because you have to go through that process and think and maybe write it down. What are all the different parts of my life? Because there's all different pieces to the puzzle. And which ones of them do I want to make a change in? Which of the things would I like to keep the same? What do I value? What are even my anti-values? I've heard somebody say recently. So if just, a different way to think about it as well. And the life that I'm trying to create, I think, to your point, when opportunities come up, it's way easier to recognize that opportunity as something that is in alignment with you if you've taken that time to think about what you value and what you're looking for, right? Because if you don't do that first part, then opportunities will come up and it won't even, your mind just doesn't even recognize it as something that is for you, because maybe it seems too different from what you're doing now, but it's not really too different from where you want to be. And yet we just don't make that connection, right? So great. That's awesome advice. Thank you, Simone. So those are kind of my side follow-up questions from just you sharing your story, but I did want to get into the topic of spirituality and business, and especially because you mentioned that earlier in your life you had denied a little bit of that for some time, and then you really leaned into it. So I just wanted to clarify to start, what does spirituality mean to you personally? Because I've heard different variations of it.
Yeah, okay. So spirituality is basically just having a deeper level of connection to self and the source of creation around you. And whether your spirituality is referred to for you as God, whether it's referred to as the universe, whether it's referred to as source or the creator, whatever it is, it's, for me, spirituality is knowing that you're connected to something that's bigger than yourself. So sometimes when you're listening to things in your brain, like we all have those little conversations, and sometimes you can really tell the difference between what's coming from you and what's not. And a prime example of this is probably when you listen to a musician talk about writing a song and they're like, the song just flowed out of me in 20 minutes, and that's because they were connecting into something bigger than themselves. They were just really connecting in and it just flowed straight out of them. That's that connection to source. That's that connection to spirituality. And by harnessing that connection to yourself and following those little nudges that are not your own programming, you have these little voices in your head that'll be like, I don't know, they're just the beliefs, the beliefs that are your own, that are your own things that you need to clear and work through. And then there's that little voice in your head that's like, oh, I really want to be a singer. Or, like, I really light up every time I hear this sort of music and I really want to dance to that. Or, I really love hearing people talk about TikTok and how they made money on TikTok. And, I really love hearing about investing, or whatever those little things and those little nudges are that light you up. Spirituality for me is being able to connect to that something that's greater than yourself and follow and listen to and hear and connect with all of those little nudges that are pointing you in the direction that your higher self, your higher soul wants you to go. And it's never doing anything to try and hurt you. So anytime you feel something that lights you up, that's you connecting in. That's you being in your spiritual state and your spiritual flow. And there are obviously lots of ways to do this, and I feel like I've gone on a tangent, but spirituality to me is having that ability to connect within to yourself, connecting within to something greater, and knowing what to follow, and having that self-awareness of whether that thing that you're following is from you or it is from something bigger than yourself, taking you to a higher purpose place.
So if someone has been living, I'm going to call it like a misaligned life for a good amount of time, and they were to say to you, Simone, I don't get that feeling of getting lit up anymore or ever, how would you recommend that they start their process of connecting to themselves and their spiritual work?
There are so many ways to do this, and I want to give you the way that worked for me. But there are so many ways to do this. A lot of people do things like breath work, and listening to sound healings and that sort of stuff. The thing for me that really got me embodying my spirituality was meditation. And but because I had been in denial for so long about my spiritual self, and as a kid, like, I had spirit guides, like, I literally was talking to like spirits as a child, and I was still like in denial. I was like, I am not spiritual, that is too woo woo for me, I'm not connected, I'm just cool, I just know what I want, and I know things, and it's just because of all the education that I've had. And it was very thought processed for me. And what really landed me into that real embodiment of my spirituality was meditation. And when I started meditating, it felt like a chore. It literally felt like a chore, and I would not be able to make it more than 5 minutes. Even to this day, I cannot do yoga. Yoga is too slow for me. I'm a dancer. Yoga is very boring. For some people though, yoga might be what connects them to their spirituality. Personally, I do Tai Chi and Qigong, which are Chinese medicine based, and Yin yoga is actually a part of that practice. But for me, going through and meditating for what in the beginning was 5 minutes a day of me just trying to pull my mind back, that's where I started. And it took time for me to do it, but through the actual habit of just connecting in and being still and being quiet, over time, that really anchored in that connection and awareness to what was going on inside, and allowed me to really be able to hear what was coming from myself and what was coming from source. But as mentioned, you can do that with things like yoga, breath work, sound healings, that sort of thing. And again, I think it's a personal journey of finding what works for you and not beating yourself up over it if it's not overnight. Because for me, when I started, as mentioned, meditating, it was like pulling teeth. And then over time, I tried different types of meditation. I tried different ways of doing meditation. And it probably took a good 6 to 12 months for me to really be able to anchor in and be like, oh, this is literally who I am now. I didn't even notice, like, it just became so much of a part of who I was that I didn't even realize that it happened, if that made sense. But I started off not beating myself up. I started off at 5 minutes, and it just grew from there. And I'm not a big believer in spending 4 hours a day meditating. I don't, we're on this planet to live, the creator or source or whatever it is, they're not there going sit in silence for 4 hours a day to be connected. They're like, go live your life. You're here to have a journey. You're here to have fun and experience things. So I don't necessarily think that you need to sit there and practice for an hour. I would recommend like 20 minutes a day max. But start somewhere where you're ready to start in a modality, and try all the modalities. Try yoga, try breathwork, try sound healing, and see what works for you. And then over time, that connection will grow.
Yeah. And I think too, to add some context to why, why can take so long, or why we should give ourselves time, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to improve our connection to self or to the source, or improve our meditation skills, I guess, is if you really think about the starting point that we're at, and then the end point that we're trying to get to, we're actually so far from it just by nature, not by nature, but just by nature of how, I guess, in Western society we live our life, right? There's so much noise, there's so much an outside noise, and there's so many responsibilities and tasks and things that keep us busy, and not just our time, but our energy, our attention, our mind is so busy on so many things that, to me, an ideal end state, and I am no meditation expert at all. I'll just start by saying that. But my ideal end state, I think, would be to get comfortable with the stillness and everything for maybe a slightly longer time than 5 minutes, understanding that, or integrating meditation into my life in a meaningful way on a daily basis, where I can just sit and be still. But then even beyond that, I would say that my ideal state is that I can go about my day, do the tasks that I'm out to do, and while I'm doing them, if I need to, I can connect to myself to help me make a decision, or to kind of recenter myself if I happen to get, triggered by something. And, to be able to manage that in the moment, I think, is the ultimate benefit that I would hope to get from my spiritual work, or the meditation that I'm I'm doing, right? It doesn't have to be just sitting on a yoga mat or sitting on the floor and in stillness, right? Would you
No.
agree?
Yeah, totally 100%. And when I say it took me a year, we're talking about a year, like from me starting out never meditating to me literally being like, I'm literally psychic. I can see the past. I can see the future. I can do a reading on someone who's in a different country that I've never met before. I hear the things. I know the things. I smell the things. I talk to the dead people, and you might not actually want to get to that level. So for me, that year involved meditation. It involved doing some other courses. It involved this. It involved that. If you're just wanting to connect in with your intuition and know what to follow, there's so many things you can do throughout your day to do that. And a really great example, I think, to really help people to know which way to move forward, and it's a really easy one that you can practice and within a week you'll have it down, is if I say to you, do you feel like hot food, as in spicy chili? Or do you feel like cold food, as in, say, something like with mint in it that's very cooling and calming? Sometimes you're going to go, yeah, I feel like hot food. And other times you're going to go, yeah, I feel like cold food. And so one way that you can really connect in with your intuition and know what the right way for you is by literally connecting in with your body and feeling the responses to questions that you're asking yourself. So if I was wanting to know whether or not I was supposed to do something that day, I would just ask the question and listen to the response. And if you need to, give yourself the polarizing opposite, and one of them is going to feel more in alignment than the other. And that's a really quick exercise you can do. You don't even need to meditate to do that one, And same thing as well. Like, I know that there are certain types of music that I can listen to, and within 3 minutes, I'm in a completely different mental state and emotional state, and sometimes that might be meditation music. Sometimes that might be classical music. And sometimes that might be like, dance music or house music or jazz or whatever, So there's lots of little ways that you can start to strengthen that intuition within yourself and also strengthen that connection to yourself and raise your vibration. There are lots of little things you can do that are going to help you to be more in alignment in your daily life, whether that's just feeling in alignment, feeling more positive and happy and vibrationally high, or knowing which way to go and making a decision. So there are lots of little things. You don't have to sit there and meditate and learn how to be psychic like that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to spend 3 years doing 300 hours of a yoga teacher's training. There are lots of little things that you can just do that are quick and easy, like just asking yourself yes and no questions and getting the response. Even muscle testing is a great way to seeing what beliefs you have that you can do at home. You can literally muscle test. If you had a list of affirmations right in front of you and you wanted to know whether on a subconscious level or not you actually believed those affirmations, you could just sit there and muscle test all that list of affirmations, and you'll be like, oh, that was 10 affirmations. I don't believe 2 of them. You just clear that belief out, and then you put in a new belief and you're good to go. So there's so many little tricks that you can do that will help you to connect within and have that more self-awareness every day without necessarily having to go the path of, spending a year or 300 teacher training hours of yoga or whatever. So there's lots of little things.
Yeah, and thanks for all those examples. That's really great to hear. And I think it goes back to just being intentional, even about your willingness to explore meditation or spirituality, right? What is it that you're trying to get out of it? And if you know that up front, then you'll know which exercises to try and which steps to take and how far to go, I guess, with it. But I'm really curious now, how does this fit into business? Because in my experience, it seems that business and spirituality have been treated as if they were mutually exclusive. And, even when you hear from successful business people, the commonly known ones anyway, not a lot of them, if any, mention spirituality as part of what's necessary to be successful in business. And even one step further, it does seem like hustle culture in general kind of prides itself on not allowing any space for our human side is sort of what it seems like to me. But you've done a lot of work marrying the two concepts. And so I'd love to hear from you. Why do you think these are interrelated, and why is it important for us to invest time and energy in both?
Yeah, so obviously if you're in business and you're an entrepreneur, you're doing it because there's something you want to get out of it. And that might be a financial gain, or it might be a lifestyle. I generally deal with entrepreneurs who want to create a life they love. That's my wheelhouse. I want to talk to people who want to create something magical for themselves, because I don't necessarily feel like we're all here to do 80 hours a week of hustle life. You know? So the thing is that a lot of people, they start down the spiritual path and they're like, I just got to think what I want, and I just got to, like, you know, have the law of attraction bring it to me. And that's not necessarily accurate. The law of attraction, it's about thinking about what you want, feeling into what you want, and then actually taking the action steps to create that, taking the aligned action to create that. Now, if you're a business owner and you're not paying attention to that, you could very easily find yourself 4 years in, having worked 80 hours a week, full on hustle culture, and no more steps forward. You're literally just in the same spot, burning out. You know what I mean? And if you're just in the spiritual space, you could find yourself literally thinking about what you want and feeling into what you want. And again, you're not moving. You know what I mean? You're just stuck in the law of attraction is going to bring it to me. The law of attraction is going to, I don't have to do anything. It's totally fine. So again, you're not really getting towards where you want to go. Whereas when you marry the two together, instead of doing that 80-hour culture hustle, you know, situation that a lot of entrepreneurs are getting stuck in, you can literally have that self-awareness and that connection to self of, okay, this is what I want to create. This is what it looks like. And then you can actually just pay attention and be like, all right, where are the little nudges that this is what I need to do next? This is what I need to do next. This is what I need to do next. You can literally make money a million ways. There are more than a million ways to make money. I'm positive on this. And for me, it's not about just having a business. It's not about just going, I've got this business and I work 80 hours and I'm burnt out, but I've made $50 million. I don't want that, you know. It's about having a life that you love through entrepreneurship and creating something magical for yourself. So integrating that spirituality and that ability to connect to your intuition and be led a little bit to the next step, because we all know what it feels like when we're in flow. We all know what it feels like when we sit down, for example, again with the musician, and we sit down and we try and do something and it takes 20 minutes as opposed to 5 hours. And when you bridge spirituality, you find that you have a lot more of those in flow moments than those work really hard and get nowhere moments. So by bridging the two together, it helps you to really align with obviously what you want and what you want for your business, but also helps you to align with the things that are going to move you forward and helps you to vibrationally attract those in and reach those things because they're in alignment, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And that explanation really helped me just now, because I guess I always thought of business as an external thing. What I mean by that is when I'm thinking about starting a business, one of the main questions that I'm asking myself is who's my client, who's my customer, and how am I adding value to them? So it seems very externally focused versus spirituality would be very internally focused. And so the question becomes, why are those two related? Like, why is it important for me to be connected to my inner self when, as a business person, I'm here to provide value to others, not myself, right? And so I think just the way that you've explained it, it helps reframe the fact that being a business owner is not, I mean, yes, the more value you can provide to others, likely, you know, you'll be able to make good money and make good sales and all of that. However, I think that it becomes very short-lived if you can't also connect the inner portion where you, as the person who's running the show, is getting value, right, as well, and is feeling aligned with what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. And because that's the thing, your business is an extension of you. So if you can connect to that spirituality and have an understanding of your beliefs and what's going on in terms of your life, that's what's going to help you to be able to grow that business. So for example, to explain this in a simple way, there's the giving and there's the receiving mode, right? So obviously as business owners, we tend to be give. Here's my products. I'm giving you time. I'm giving you energy. I'm giving you content. Here's my products. Give. But if you don't have your receiving mode turned on, which is energetic, you're not necessarily going to be getting that back. So you're going to be constantly giving, constantly hustling, constantly doing the thing, but you're not receiving back because you don't have the receiving mode on. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, that receiving mode, it's not that hard to turn on, you know, because you've got that awareness, spirituality and energy and energetics. And you know that if you can't receive in one area of your life, you can't receive in other areas because that business is an extension for you. So for an example of this is, where in your life, for example, do you not feel able to receive? How do you go receiving compliments? How do you go receiving help? How do you go receiving funds? Do you shy away when people are like, how much does that cost? And you kind of pull away and pull back. And it's having that awareness of the spirituality with this particular example of the giving mode and the receiving mode, and knowing my giving mode, that's at 120%, but my receiving mode, I can't even receive a compliment without having a little bit of a resistance moment. You know what I mean? And using the spirituality to kind of look at that business and go, yeah, cool, giving 120%, but receiving's at 20%. So that's why I'm hustling so much, but nothing's coming back, because I'm not paying attention to the energetics that's going on around me and as an extension of me in my business. You know what I mean? So by doing that work and having that connection to yourself, it allows you to see where things aren't necessarily working for you and to understand why on an energetic and spiritual level, to be able to work through and fix that. And it's not that hard when you actually sit there and go, there's receiving mode and there's giving mode, and I've been trained to give, but I haven't really been trained to receive. Where in my life am I not receiving? And starting to really focus on that and take that in and build your receiving mode back up so that your giving mode is, say, 50 and your receiving mode is, say, 50, so that they're more balanced, you know, or take it to the next level. But just to give you an example of how the two can work together with the business and their energetics and spirituality, that's a really easy example, because I think in a Western culture, we're all so trained to give, but a lot of people will struggle a little bit with the receiving.
Yeah, well, perfect example. As you were explaining, I thought, wow, you're talking about me. Totally relate. So then the last question I want to ask you is just on that. How then, what's the practical steps that are happening that allow you to rebuild your receiving side then? Like, what does that look like? Is it just, reminding yourself? Is it affirmations? Is it something else?
There's so many ways that you can do it. And I think it's working out what's going on in you and for yourself, and seeing what works for you. So I do energy work on people, and I still have someone who does energy work with me. So sometimes there are things that I'm like, I'm just not shifting this belief. I'm going to go see someone else. Something just keeps coming up. It's a reoccurring pattern that I can't shake. So I'm going to see someone else. So it could be something that's been showing up for you your whole life, and you do need that extra help. But on an at-home level, there are so many things you can do. So it's literally as simple as looking into something like muscle testing, for example. Did you want me to just show you an example of that?
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah. So if you have your fingers like this and you put them in a circle like this and another circle like this, and you link them together, right? And you ask an affirming statement and a non-true statement, for example. So an affirming statement is, my name is Simone, and it'll hold. If I say my name is Claire, my fingers come out. Okay. So that's how I can test for that belief. I'm a female, I'm a male, and it comes out, right? So one way that if I thought that I wasn't in the receiving mode, I could literally sit there and brain dump all of the beliefs I think I have about receiving, like I'm not open to receiving, I can't receive compliments, blah, 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 blah. And I would write a list of, say, 10 of them, for example. And what I would do is I would just sit there and test them and see if it's true. Do I actually believe that I can't receive? And on the other hand, if I have all these dreams and hopes that I want to have, like I want to make $10,000 a month and my business is going to be a success, and then I test those as well and I see what I believe and what I don't believe, and from there I get this really good place of knowing where I'm actually starting from with my receiving mode. And it's as simple as just shifting the belief after that. So if we're working on the example of you've just brain dumped out your 10 beliefs and you've tested what you've got, you can literally then just erase those beliefs. Just literally picture the writing of that belief rubbing out in front of you. So if my belief is I'm not in the receiving mode, You would just literally picture a rubber, erasing that out and downloading the belief, I am in the receiving mode, and just watch that as a little screen in your mind, however you want to play that, download back in, and then test yourself again. I'm in the receiving mode. It's going to be a yes, because you've just got rid of one belief and replaced it with another. Okay. So that's one way you can do that. Another way you can change your beliefs is through something like EFT tapping, which is working on the meridian channels of the body. So there's some great people you can look into for this sort of work, which is Brad Yates. So he does these little tapping videos. He's probably got one on being in the receiving mode, I'm not sure, but he has a lot on things like self-love, stress, anxiety. And basically it's taking the vibrations that are stuck and stagnant in your body and tapping them out along the meridians of the body, and then tapping in new vibrations. And you can do the same thing with those beliefs. So for example, if I had a list of affirmations and goals that I wanted to achieve, I want to make 10K months. The very first thing I would do is muscle test whether I believe that or not, erase that belief out so that I believe it. Then for me personally, I would go through and do an EFT tapping round for that belief. And then it's as simple as, if you want to check that belief, just go back to that list every day for a week and test the belief and see if that list has held for you. And if it hasn't held, do it again and do it again. And it's just that having awareness of where you're at and what you want, checking for the beliefs if you want to check for the beliefs in really quick, easy ways. Do a round of EFT if you want to. Like, there's so many ways subconsciously. Before you go to bed, the half an hour before bed and the half an hour when you wake up in the morning, your subconscious mind is really open to taking in new suggestions and stuff like that. So another simple way of doing this sort of thing is just listen to an affirmation track right before bed and first thing in the morning. So there's a lot of little things that you can do to get yourself into the receiving mode. There's literally actual meditations that go for 40 minutes on getting into the receiving mode. So there's a lot of little things that you can do, and it's not as hard or as daunting as you think, and it's fun. Like Brad Yates, who I mentioned, who does tapping. I love Brad Yates. I love the way he is as a person on YouTube, and I resonate with him so strongly that it's fun for me to tap with Brad. Or I love that I can just test for my beliefs myself at home. Some days I might actually feel like doing a 45-minute meditation. So I will literally just go onto Google and be like 45-minute meditation for receiving mode, So there's many, many, many ways to do it, but that's probably 3 solid examples just for the receiving mode alone. But you can do those same techniques for anything that's coming up for you,
Wow, that's fascinating. I'll definitely look into all of them, and I'll try the muscle testing because it seems like the simplest to do yourself at home. And I would assume too that it gets maybe easier or more fun once you start to see some changes, right? Because if you come back to it on a regular basis, I'm sure, like you said, right, you try it once, you don't feel aligned, and then you try it again, then you feel more aligned. So that's really exciting, and I'm excited to try it. So thank you for sharing that. So just in the interest of time, Simone, I will probably end it there. But before we wrap up, I did want to ask, where can people go to learn more about you and about your work if they wanted to check you out some more?
Yes, everywhere. Thank you so much, by the way. This has been super fun. I've loved it. Could talk for hours. But so my podcast and YouTube channel are called Create Your Life with Simone Lea. So you can find me on both, obviously, podcast channels and YouTube. So iTunes, that sort of thing. And then also I'm on Facebook. I am Simone Lea. And there's also the Instagram, which is Create Your Life at Simone Lea. And then I am Simone Lea if you want to follow the show or if you want to follow me. But they're really the main 5 places at this point, is the 2 Instagrams, YouTube, Facebook, and the podcast are the main things. But you can also jump onto my website, send me an email, that sort of thing is also fine as well. I love connecting with people. So just pop in and say hi.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this conversation. I also feel like we could have talked for hours, but maybe we'll have to come back another day to continue the conversation. I do like to also thank our listeners, as always, for your time and attention. Please make sure to check us out online and subscribe to both our podcasts so that you don't miss out on more great content like what we had today. So once again, thank you so much, Simone. Thanks, everyone, and take care.
Thanks, guys.